Static Whisper Stories brings you a quiet story where memory may not be as private as it feels. Tonight's archive holds a faint voice no one remembers recording, yet it seems to know far too much. They're not saying anything you didn't already know. That was the first whisper I noticed, and it was buried under a child's laughter on a tape stamped Summer 92. I was 3 hours into a day of digitizing my job, my small freelance business sitting in a studio, lit by one lamp and the thin glow of a monitor. The tape looked ordinary. Grainy beach shots, a dog chasing waves, a father making a joke. It sounded like a home. Then, when I boosted the audio to reduce tape hiss, a soft syllable came forward, as if someone had leaned in very close to the camera. I froze. Not because it was eerie, my work lives in the uncanny, but because it addressed me by tone. Not my name, but the posture of being watched. They're not saying anything you didn't already know. I replayed it, slow, then in a spectrogram. There were shapes where no shapes should be, a thin ridge of consistent frequencies that threaded through footage recorded decades apart. Different cameras, different mics, different houses, yet the ridge repeated with a patience that looked deliberate. Got my name is Mara Klein. I digitize people's pasts. I turn battered tapes into files, files into memories people can send to their kids. I work with elderly clients and small historical societies. People trust me to preserve the shape of things. You'd expect a job like mine to be neutral, almost clerical. Mostly it is. But for 2 weeks, I watched one family's life unfold, not as a linear record, but as a conversation that someone else was having with them. By whisper dot, the family came as a single archive, a box of tapes donated after the house was cleared. The folder labeled them as the Harlow Collection weddings, backyard birthdays, a boy growing up across the 80s and 90s. I started like any other job. Clean the heads, thread the tape, set levels. The whisper soft, human, impossible to assign first, showed up in a reel of grainy vacation footage. Later, as I worked, I found it again in a baptism video, under a static shot of a cake, in a graduation clip, at first, I thought of digital artifacts. Echoes, bleed, poor transfer. Anomalies in the analog to digital conversion are common. So I ran checks. I used 3 different decks. I cross-checked with a station in Boston I sometimes partner with. I compared sample rates, codecs, and even the chemical profile of the tape stock. The ridge persisted. It lived in the analog layer. It wasn't electronic noise. It was disturbingly recorded, layered in at the time of filming. That's where it gets difficult to explain without sounding like someone who spends too much time alone with old footage. The ridge of sound was consistent enough that I could map it, like a faint watermark across the family's timeline. The whisper knew family routines that weren't public in upstairs bedroom, that always stayed dark, the way the mother preferred to fold napkins on Tuesdays. It called out names with the familiarity of someone who had been present during the events. But the whispers also did, so I ran another experiment I shouldn't have. I fed the isolated whispers into a speech enhancement model. I used a lightweight AI to remove background noise and emphasize the human fundamental. The model did its job too well. It spooled the fragments into something that read like instruction. Hide the letters. Do not tell them this name. When you listen to a single whisper in isolation, it feels like a private command. When you place them in sequence, they read like a ledger entries that track secrets. I knew I was overstepping. My ethics board is basically my conscience and a bowl of instant noodles. But curiosity has edges. I reached out to the family contact listed in the archive. An email, a polite description of my work, a question. Did anyone ever speak quietly into the camera? The reply took days. No, the woman wrote. We never saw or heard anything. The tapes are all we've got. Please, if you find anything, we want to know. Her name was Claire Harlow. She sent me photographs. The family in. I sent a file. Claire wrote back in the night. We heard the whisper, but not the same. She told me her mother had always insisted the voice was just wind. Her brother, Mark, said it told him once to burn a stack of letters he kept in the attic. He burned them, Claire said in the email, and later said he couldn't remember doing it for a whole week. I could have stopped then. I didn't. Instead, I found myself building a map, a timeline of the whispers, each one anchored to a tape and to a small, private choice. A letter burned, a phone call avoided, a man moved to the city, a marriage postponed. The interesting, terrible pattern was not that the whispers coerced, at least not in any cinematic way, but that they amplified existing fissures. They arrived like small suggestions at the soft points where people already felt doubt. They never screamed. When I tried to trace authorship, I found a thin public record. A local public access news clip in 1994 showed the Harlows protesting a zoning decision. A camera operator from the station retired, now remembered being at family events occasionally. He told me we filmed a lot back then. People liked to have things recorded. It's weird, Mara. That family, there's always been an undertone. But no one remembers whispering into cameras. Then I found a receipt tucked in the archive. A printed invoice for a firm that offered memory management services, a startup. That sounds like a nightmare, pressed into polite corporate speak. The invoice dated to 2002 for archival consultation. The company no longer had a website. In an old forum thread archived by a digital historian, I found a user who claimed to have used a similar company to clean up tapes. The poster's account reads like a confession. They paid to have certain moments quietly. After that, the line between human choice and algorithm blurred into a dangerous overlap. What if someone once had used a service to edit whispers into tapes? What if those whispers were not live but stitched, an audio track added across generations, like planting seeds in a field that would be harvested later? I used the cloud backups to check for uploaded masters, public copies, any trace. The Harlows had a small social media presence. A relative had uploaded a clip in 2010 and tagged family. The comments under that clip were polite. Beautiful family. One commenter wrote, "That echo in the background freaks me out," and then the comment was gone, deleted, but cached by the wayback of smaller servers. When I found an archived copy of the clip, the whisper sat louder than before, as if someone had compressed. 3 nights into heavy listening, I started receiving messages from strangers. Someone named G_archive sent a link to a forum where people exchange oddities. ghost sounds, misplaced laughter, audio artifacts. Attached was a file labeled Harlow-1982 Whisper Isolated .wa and a note, "We think it's a project." The messages were anonymous, a litany of half-remembered names. The problem with anonymity is that it tells you that many other people are paying attention, and that attention breeds a diff. The more I learned, the more ordinary the horror became. These whispers did not shout. They advised. They punctured routines until someone took an action that, in turn, rewrote a family story. A man burning letters isn't cinematic. It's quiet and bureaucratic, and the weight of law sits in the laundry room. The whispers were effective precisely because they gave plausible deniability. One person could say, "I thought of it," and the guilt would fester into secret keeping. It culminated when Claire sent me a clip from 2016. A nephew had filmed a small birthday dinner, and in it, the youngest daughter, who had been quiet for years, looks directly into the camera and says to no one in particular, "Why didn't you tell me?" Then the tape flickers, and in the patch section, the whisper answers, in a cadence that mimics a mother's hush, "You wouldn't have believed." I had to decide what to do with what I had. Publish? Hide? Contact authorities? The whispers occupied a legal gray, manipulation recorded, influence unknown. I sent a final email to Claire, offering everything I had, including the enhanced audio, the spectrogram images, the invoice. Her reply came hours later. "We don't want this made public. If it's a service, we want to know who bought it. But we can't have strangers listening." There was a grief in the message, the desire to keep sorrow private, to avo. So I complied. I handed the collection back with notes and copies. And then, 2 days later, an unmarked parcel arrived at my studio. Inside was a single DVD burned with handwriting. "For your archive. No return address." The disc contained footage I hadn't seen before. A 2005 birth date that had been omitted from the donated box. I loaded it, hands shaking, and in the first minute of footage, played at normal speed, the whisper was plain as day, speaking into the camera not as a ghost, but as someone sit. I looked for faces. Who was at that table? The angle cut away. The audio track had no visible mouth. That should have been the final puzzle, the moment I closed the box and walked away. Instead, because curiosity is a muscle I have no patience for, I ran the whisper through the enhancement one more time. The model returned several possible transcriptions. One of them read like a business term: "Stage the omission. Build consent." For a second, it became clear, in the way clarity sometimes briefly slams into you. These whispers were not spirits. They were edits, instructions sewn into the fabric of recorded memory. Someone individuals, corporations, and industry had learned how to plant suggestions into. The things we trust to speak for us. They turned private footage into a subtle counseling of the future. They advised and thus altered the trajectory of lives. I shut everything down that night. I shut the studio, walked home, and lay awake thinking about how much of what we remember is mediated by the things we record. If an archive can be curated, can it also be curated toward a different truth? Is the past a stable object, or is it porous, open to suggestion the way soil is open to seed? The next morning, my inbox had a single subject line. "We noticed your work on Harlow." The message was short and clinical. "Best to stop looking into this." It read, "Curators should preserve, not edit. We know you know. Cash offers can be discussed. No signature. No return address." I closed the laptop. I unplugged the decks. I threw the DVD into the trash and watched as it spun in the compactor until the plastic shredded. I don't know if that was the right choice. All I know is this: every family I archive contains quiet decisions, things forgotten, things chosen, gaps that hold shape because we choose not to fill them. The thought that someone might whisper into those gaps and watch the quiet sway into action is a new, modern terror. So if you ever hand over a box of tapes or upload a hard drive of old footage to a cloud with a friendly name, remember, preservation is not neutral. Files can be touched. Memory is not only what was recorded, but the decisions made afterward by people with motives, by systems that edit, by industries that promise tidy narratives. When you press play, listen for the obvious things, but also listen for the small instructions, the patient murmurs that ask you to do a tiny thing that will alter everything. I told myself it was finished. Case closed in the quiet, freelance way. Cases close when no one officially opens them. I took smaller jobs. Wedding tapes. A church archive. Nothing with dense family history. Nothing with decades stacked in cardboard boxes. But something subtle had shifted in how I listened. Before the Harlow project, I heard tape hiss as texture, dropouts as age. After it, every silence sounded intentional. Every pause felt designed. And once you start hearing intention, it becomes very hard to stop. About 3 weeks later, a client from Oregon mailed in a set of mini DV cassettes. Completely unrelated family. Different era. Early 2000s digital camcorder footage. Clean audio. Or it should have been, the first tape transferred perfectly. Kids in a backyard sprinkler. A barbecue. Harmless, cheerful, ordinary. Then, at exactly 14 minutes and 8 seconds, the waveform dipped in a familiar way. Not identical, but structurally similar. A narrow band of compressed frequencies riding under the main audio, like someone speaking very softly into a wall. I didn't enhance it. Not at first. I just stared at the graph. My stomach dropped before my mind caught up, because this wasn't analog bleed anymore. This was digital. Different format, different decade, different family. Yet the pattern had that same patient consistency. The kind that suggests process, not accident. That night, I didn't open enhancement software. I didn't isolate the audio. I just exported the file and played it at normal volume while making dinner, trying to convince myself it was nothing. Halfway through cooking, I noticed I'd turned the stove off without remembering doing it. Not absent-mindedly, deliberately, as if I'd just decided something important. I rewound the clip. Same time stomp. Same faint undercurrent. I leaned closer to the speaker. No clear words. Just cadence. The shape of suggestion. And then I realized something worse than hearing a whisper. I'd acted on it before, understanding it. After that, I stopped casual listening completely. Headphones only. Notebook open. strict professional distance. I documented every anomaly like a scientist, trying not to contaminate as sample dot patterns emerged slowly. The whispers, if that's still the right word, never contradicted a person's likely inclination. They nudged, reinforced, made the easier choice feel inevitable. That's why no one reported coercion. It never felt external, Dot. It felt like clarity. I started wondering how long this had existed outside my awareness. Old corporate training videos, political campaign footage, lifestyle content. The modern world runs on recorded media. If subtle influence could be embedded there, invisibly, the scale wasn't personal anymore. It was environmental. Dot. The thought kept me up more than any ghost story ever could. One evening, I got a call from Claire again. First time since the archive handoff. Her voice sounded thinner, like someone conserving emotional energy. We found out who paid that memory consultancy invoice. She said. Dot's silence stretched. It was my father. Not surprising. Not comforting either. He said he just wanted certain arguments softened in the family tapes. Thought it would help everyone move forward. But he swears he never approved. Whatever else happened. Whatever else. That phrase does a lot of work. Claire told me her brother had started noticing gaps in recent memories too. Small ones. Misplaced objects. Decisions he didn't recall making. Nothing dramatic. Just enough to erode trust in your own narrative. Then she said something that stuck. Once you think your memories can be edited, every choice feels suspect. That's the real horror, I think. Not manipulation itself. The permanent doubt afterward. We ended the call politely. No promises to keep investigating. Just mutual exhaustion. I tried to return to normal workflow. But clients started mentioning odd things. Unprompted. A retired teacher joked that her grandchildren remember events slightly. Better after watching old videos. A city archivist asked if digital cleanup could reduce awkward emotional content. A marketing firm emailed asking about sub-perceptual audio restoration for engagement. Optimization. Language evolves around capabilities. You can hear technology arriving before you see it, just in how people start asking questions. I never accepted those jobs. Financially, that wasn't wise. Psychologically, it was necessary. The final incident, the one that made me seriously consider leaving the field, was quiet. No anonymous emails. No mysterious packages. Just my own archive. I keep backups of completed projects for 6 months. Insurance, essentially. One afternoon, while clearing storage, I opened the Harlow folder to confirm deletion. There was a new file inside, timestamped that morning. I hadn't added it. No cloud sync active. No shared access. Local drive only. The file name was simple. Reference copy. Inside was a short video. My studio. Shot from an angle slightly above my main monitor. Recent. Maybe days old. In the footage. Unworking. Headphones on. Focused. Ordinary. And underneath the room tone. Barely audible even without enhancement. There's that familiar cadence again. Calm. Patient. This time. I didn't isolate it. I didn't run models. Didn't slow playback. Because I already knew the operational principle. Suggestion works best when you don't dissect it. I deleted the file, emptied the recycle bin, disconnected external drives, powered everything down. For a while, nothing else happened. No new anomalies, no strange communications, but the psychological residue remains. When I watch old footage now, even casually online, I notice how often people look just slightly past the camera lens, as if listening, as if waiting for confirmation. Maybe it's nothing, maybe it's everything. I still digitize tapes, but less frequently. And I warn clients now, gently, without specifics. Preservation keeps the past alive, but it also keeps it editable. Most people laugh. Some don't. Single quotes T. And occasionally, when I'm alone in the studio late at night, I catch myself almost making a decision, turning off a light, sending an email, deleting a clip before I consciously choose it. That half-second gap? That's what unsettles me, because I can't tell whether it's normal human hesitation, or whether somewhere, in some layer of recorded memory I've absorbed over years of listening, a voice learned how to sound exactly like my own thoughts.